And so I got up and I was walking the dog when I heard the shots. And walked around the block, didn't know what it was. Walked around the block just because it was a short walk. We went around the block, came back, and my ex was outside to tell me that one of the survivors was in our house. And from there, I grabbed my camera and ran up to the synagogue. And the cops stopped me. I'm halfway up. I had my camera running, and they're just like, "Lady, get out of here." So I guess I was the first reporter on the scene because I was really next door. In the past, I was a police reporter for a while, and I could always go home. I could always go home and get away from whatever was happening. So there was that break. When this happened, it was so personal. It was right there. It was my daughter's preschool.
I was there that morning as a reporter. I got woken up out of bed and told there was an active shooter situation at Tree of Life and that I needed to go cover it for The Guardian. I had very little sleep. There had been a World Series baseball game. It was 18 innings long. It was the longest World Series baseball game the night before in LA. I'd been up till 3:30 in the morning, and I woke up to a phone call from my friend saying, "Hey, there's been a big shooting. I'm going down. You're going to go down." And so many reporters were already here, live tweeting the shooting between the cops and the shooter.
11 people were killed when a gunman opened fire in the Tree of Life synagogue during service this morning, saying this is likely the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in the history of the U.S.
I was in Aiello's pizza parlor watching baseball. I had filed my story, and I heard this woman start screaming. And her brother had been killed here. And they just found out that he had died on the operating table, and he was screaming. And I can still think of it. I'd been going there all my life since I was 12, earlier than that. And that's where we went after baseball games. That was our spot. And to be in Aiello's and to hear this pain, it shook me. It shook me the way nothing's ever really shaken me in my life. It wasn't Brazil. This was supposed to be my idyllic childhood neighborhood that was being engulfed. And I'll never forget the screaming. And what was worse about the screaming was they started apologizing to everybody there, repeatedly. And nobody wanted them to apologize. They didn't need to apologize. We knew what was going on. And this old Yinzer couple, the guy was a steel worker, his wife was a nurse, said, "Hey, why don't you folks drink up? We could be the designated drivers tonight." And that's this city at its best. This city can be so racist and so terrible, but we can also find incredible solidarity here. The night of the massacre, I was up here on this hillside. There was a big vigil here, and people just stood here for hours. Not even talking, some people, just milling around because nobody wanted to be alone that night. This is Mr. Rogers' church here. He lived in the neighborhood here, and as kids we would see him walking around. And so the show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, that felt like it was our neighborhood. There was a source of pride there. And so to be here at this church, on this property, on that day, it felt, I don't know. Mr. Rogers has this saying they always talk about in Pittsburgh.
Always look for the helpers.
When in times of trouble, look for the helpers. And it's true in that kind of moment. And I think a lot of people here that night were looking for the helpers, looking for what was next. But we made it clear that we weren't going to be afraid for standing up for immigrants' rights.
I'm just so proud of all of you who have grown up with us. And I know how tough it is some days to look with hope and confidence on the months and years ahead. But I would like to tell you what I often told you when you were much younger. I like you just the way you are. And what's more, I'm so grateful to you for helping the children in your life to know that you'll do everything you can to keep them safe and to help them express their feelings in ways that will bring healing in many different neighborhoods. It's such a good feeling to know that we're lifelong friends.
But are we really friends? The slogan "Stronger Than Hate" has appeared on billboards, on t-shirts, on car bumper stickers. But many people, particularly people in the African American community, say that Stronger Than Hate isn't really the reality of Pittsburgh, even in the wake of the Tree of Life massacre.
It was a cool, like the graphic was cool, when it comes to Stronger Than Hate, because they adopted like the Steeler graphic. I remember at one point, and as one hood, we began to do a lot of solidarity work with our Jewish allies after Tree of Life. Particularly with an organization called Bend the Arc and an organization called Repair the World. And I remember at one point, an artist came to me and said, "Hey, what if I take this to take this Stronger Than Hate graphic and put like a purple rose in it, to identify how do you think folks will react?" And I was like, folks would believe it's false. I was like, I wouldn't even do that, because like if I saw that, I'd be like, that's not real. Because, when Antoine was killed, we didn't get the same reaction. You know what I'm saying? When we was out there protesting, we didn't get the same support. Like, to us, it was like Stronger Than Hate doesn't include me. It was like really, from the start, it's like, oh, that doesn't mean black people in Pittsburgh, because that's never been our experience. Our experience has been one of racism, oppression, hate, worst place to live for black women, study after study about how bad it is for black people to live in Pittsburgh. You know what I'm saying? This is why I made the song America's Most Livable City, because the same year Pittsburgh was called the most livable city, black people we were the poorest black community in the country when it came to inner city poverty, same year. So it's like that, even Pittsburgh being livable doesn't apply to me. Pittsburgh being Stronger Than Hate doesn't apply to me. You know what I'm saying? My reality and my lived experience as a person in Pittsburgh. And so for us, it was always like just a slogan, but it wasn't a real when it came to like how we live.
Monica Ruiz is the head of Casa San Jose, an immigrants' rights group in Pittsburgh formed 5 years ago.
When I started doing immigrants' rights work here in Pittsburgh, one of the first communities that came out very, very strong was the Jewish community. And they have been wonderful allies to our community. And that's something that I had never felt before. And they came out in a way where it wasn't like, hey, things are kind of bad for immigrants right now. Let me know if you ever need anything. It was more like, we're here right now. Tell us what to do. They have seen the Jewish community on the front lines, when we're protesting immigration, when we're shutting down bridges and intersections. The Jewish community has always been there very strong for us.
For a while, things seemed like they were going to change in Pittsburgh. But then they reverted back to the way they've always been. Construction unions spent heavily to pass an E-Verify bill, making it tough for immigrants to work in the state. And other unions spent nearly $200,000 in an attempt to defeat Summer Lee, the first black woman ever elected to the State House from Western PA. They spent heavily against her because she was against fracking and called for crackdowns on pollution.
I live in the city of Pittsburgh, and I cannot tell you how many times I've been told to go back to where I come from in front of my children, yelling and screaming at me on the boulevard where I live.
Over the last decade, the Latino population has grown by over 40% in Pittsburgh. But still, many Latinos say they don't feel comfortable here.
I do not see myself staying in Pittsburgh that long, just because I feel like there's change that needs to be done. And do I believe that I precisely can fully make that change? I can make some change, yeah, but I feel like there's other places out there for me to explore necessarily and be able to settle in a place that I will be more comfortable in the long run, I would say.
While the city of Pittsburgh has made extensive efforts to attract Asian immigrants to the city's university and high-tech jobs, Latino immigrants say that they aren't given the same treatment.
Coming in, well, they took over, right? And then so that they would send these letters back home. Like, it's a great place, come. And then when those folks started coming in, the folks that are already here were like, whoa, right? You folks, the Polish and the Germans, we don't want you here. We're okay. We got this. And then, they were able to assimilate quickly because they looked like them, right? And so there was still the accents and the different languages and the different foods, but like clearly, looking at someone, you couldn't really tell. And then it happened again when the Italians came, right? And so because they looked different, it was like, oh no, but we already have this great thing going on here. We don't want you.
In 1892, unions organized across racial and ethnic lines to fight U.S. Steel. However, now unions in Pittsburgh have lost their way, with many of them backing anti-immigrant measures.
It was something that was not a complete and total shock, not only because of the election in 2016 and how white supremacists and white nationalist groups had been energized, but because of the divisions within our own past here in Western Pennsylvania. When generations, or waves I should say, of immigrants were brought in to disrupt and undercut the work of previous waves of migrants in order to further line the pockets of the bosses. The story of the Homestead strike is how that plan was foiled because those who were already in Homestead accepted the Slavic newcomers. And so when the skilled unionized workers went on strike, they had the support of the whole community. But that's not always the case. That's probably the exception to the rule. 1919, the Great Steel Strike, saw the migration for the first time in large numbers of African Americans who were deliberately brought from the South to break the strikes. So the use of one group to break strikes of another in the mines, in the mills, around the region is part of the divisive history, or the history that indicates division. I mean, there's also the history of unity as people came together to form unions, but there's also that darker specter haunting our memories.
The Black Lives Matter movement, though, has given new energy to growing solidarity between immigrants and African Americans in Pittsburgh.
And I think the first time that I really saw it was when the verdict came in for Antoine Rose. And so we work with a lot of undocumented high schoolers, a lot. And the day that there was the huge protest downtown, I cannot tell you how many called and said, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. I want to show support to the black community because we know what this is like and we know that it is wrong and how can we do this? And I said, well, you have to talk to your parents because this is, you don't know who's going to be there. You could easily get arrested. Anything could happen. And we ended up taking, I think it was like 3 vanfuls of kids. We picked them up at school. We took them to the protest. And then afterwards, they even went back to school to finish the day. But I've never had a more beautiful day than that day when I saw all of those Latinos screaming that Black Lives Matter. And I think at that moment I was like, oh, okay, now we can build. We were nowhere near building yet. Now we can build off of this.
Casa San Jose emerged, when we first started doing this work, I don't know if Casa San Jose was even there, but even to see Casa San Jose emerge and some of these other Mexican organizations and artists emerge, it was an undocumented Mexican woman artist who chose not to be named that painted the mural of Antoine that we were carrying around the city. So if we held it out in front of the courthouse, you know what I'm saying? And, we asked like, hey, can we give you credit? She said, I don't want any credit. So she's still involved in the movement. She's still doing a lot of art for the movement. And, that's how she chooses to move. Like, she didn't want to be named or credited for that work. But that was, if you ever seen us holding that mural and it's of Antoine, that painting of Antoine, that was her work.
Despite construction unions spending hundreds of thousands of dollars against her, Summer Lee won her re-election overwhelmingly with 77% of the vote last June.
At some point you have to conform. Like Summer Lee's not going anywhere, right? And there's other people that are learning and seeing that. And a lot of people in this area have had their seats for such a long time, 10, 20, 30 years, right? And they have this like good old boy mentality where it's like, oh yeah, but we're going to keep, this, Pittsburgh isn't blue, Pittsburgh is purple, right? And so like we want to keep the status quo. But what they're not realizing is that their constituency is changing, right? And there's a lot of people that are speaking up. There's a lot of times that folks are, going to speak to their elected officials or holding a rally in their, in their parking lot or whatever, and where, people have to start changing the way that they think, or they need to get the hell out of their seats because we're going to find folks to run.
33-year-old Emily Kincaid was recently elected to the state house after defeating Adam Ravenstahl, the brother of former Pittsburgh Mayor Luke Ravenstahl. Ravenstahl's support for the anti-immigrant E-Verify became a key issue in the race.
Yeah, and it's the reason that Adam lost SEIU's endorsement, because he voted for E-Verify. They played a pretty substantial role in helping me get elected, particularly in fundraising, because when you get the investment of a major union like that, then other people start paying attention, and it was sort of hard to get traction with the district that I was in, because I think a lot of people wrote my district off as being too conservative. It was a really conservative district that wouldn't have elected a progressive woman, and that's just not the case. That's not the demographics of the district. So I think that SEIU really signaled that I was, progressive and a serious candidate and somebody that people should pay attention to. I think, it kind of changed the narrative, I guess, a little bit around my race and how winnable it was for someone challenging, an incumbent Democrat with, significant name recognition.
Like the terrorist who committed mass murders in El Paso and Charleston, the shooter in Pittsburgh was also influenced by the media. He was a long-haul truck driver working non-union, working very long hours for very little pay. And he started getting into this right-wing talk radio program, Quinn in the Morning. And he actually was listed as a producer on there because he helped them get on the web in the late 90s, which then got them syndicated. There's no question right-wing talk radio played a big role in pushing this guy over the edge.
You control the narrative, and you control the media. That's all you hear. There's people that don't leave their homes. Well, a lot of us don't leave our homes right now, but the only thing that they're getting is from the media, right? And if that's all they hear and that's all they know, and then they see someone that looks like me walking down the street, what are they going to think, right? Or one of my sons, what are they going to think?
We don't. I think, this is why One Hood Media started. We started the One Hood Media Academy because of a study that Heinz Endowment and Pew Center did, specifically around how black men are portrayed in the media. That, 90% of the time on televised media, it was a crime. Black men are criminals. That when it came to quality of life stories about black men, it's less than 3% in the media. You know what I'm saying? So we're either a criminal 90% of the time, the other times we're catching footballs for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's pretty much it. But that's how we started. You know what I'm saying? We started because of how the media was misrepresenting us. So to come to, 2020 and see the disintegration of the Post-Gazette. It's wild to me. I follow Michael Santiago, who was, a photographer that was actually on his way to photograph One Hood. When he was told he could not come photograph us because we were at the first Civil Saturday that Black Young and Educated did. So the Post-Gazette wrote a story about our work around COVID that they put on the front page, and he was like, hey, I need to come shoot a photograph of you. Hey, we're going to be at Civil Saturday. This is Black Young and Educated's first protest. And basically, he hit me up and said, I can't come. I was told I can't cover any protests. To see him now, he's in Rochester doing some of the most amazing protest coverage of what's happening in Rochester right now, but he had to leave the Post-Gazette. So it's fascinating to watch the Post-Gazette really disintegrate to the point where now Keith Burris, who's just an absolute racist, that went on the Laura Ingraham show on Fox News to talk about him not being biased, which is it's so ridiculous, it's laughable. You know what I'm saying? Now they're bringing in the dude from Philadelphia, Inquirer, who was forced to resign because after watching several black people killed by the police, decided to put out a fucking op-ed called Buildings Matter Too. What the fuck? Like, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, and it's like, you know, I'm be honest, you know what I'm saying? And I, you know, I be trying not to, you know, but I'll fuck around and I, like, he should have had his ass kicked on sight. He should have walked into that place. I realize I'm on camera, and he should have got his ass kicked on sight and then kicked out. How dare you, while you see body after body of black people drop, open your mouth to say buildings matter too, and now he's at the Post-Gazette. So this is the Brock family, like the racist family that runs the Tribune Review, deciding to take a stance. And their stance is, we're going to uphold white supremacy in this moment.
There's a lack of support for more diverse media because there's a lack of diversity in management in these media corporations. Look at how media has been consolidated. What is about 6 companies that own just about every media outlet there is. And they've taken away local jobs from people where local jobs should be here. There's one guy who's on 1,500 stations. And his views start to resonate with a lot of people who feel that things are being taken from them. And so there's a lack of diversity in the management that decides these things. There's a lack of diversity in the ownership that decides these. BET isn't even owned by black folks anymore. They're doing, oh, we're on our anniversary, and for so many years we have been blah, 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 blah. They ain't owned by black folks. There's no independent black media out here except for you and folks like you. There are a lot of different. Well, but it's still it's as you say. How many labor reporters are out here? Yeah. You know, it's the way, and it's hard to get advertising if you're an independent media source, because a lot of times you're talking about subjects that work against the corporate interest that would advertise with you. So people complain all the time, but will they go in their wallets and pull out some do-re-mi and start giving you some money? Is it, you're going to have to do a lot of pledge breaks to get them to support it, because they talk about the independent media, but I don't know how you do it.
And so part of why we started was, okay, we're going to teach, we started specifically around black men. We're going to teach black men how to analyze media and how to tell our own stories. And that's kind of how One Hood Media started, and kind of, you know, formed into this artist collective. And, you know, we brought some young, you know, a young woman came and said she wanted to be a part of it. We opened it up to, you know, youth of color, and then really just artists and activists in general.
Now with the election close, many worry that even if Joe Biden wins, it won't be enough to roll back white supremacy, if not taken on more seriously.
One of the lessons that we haven't learned is that our liberation is tied together. I think that we, you know, we live in a society that is very steeped in white supremacy. And white supremacy is very hierarchical. In advocacy, there needs to be more inclusion in what liberation looks like across all spectrums, and not just like race, and not just sexuality, not just gender identity, all of that, religion, all of it. Like, so I don't know, like, I think for me, we still have this very closed mind and very tunnel vision scope, instead of broadening that out and really kind of looking for the marginalized in every intersection, and not just, you know, specific ones.
You haven't asked me if I think it's going to happen again. Yes. Yes. I think the conditions now are worse than they were when the shooting happened. I think that the metastasis of a set of interlocking conspiracy theories, which have at their root the conspiracy theory, the original conspiracy theory, which is anti-Semitism, is at a more advanced stage now than it was, and is more at a more popular place now than it was. It to have been, as I said, this kind of like singular outbreak of violence from a sort of singular lone wolf, lost, deranged individual who we've convinced ourselves fell down this sort of rabbit hole into violent action that only a really particular kind of, deranged loner, loser, whatever figure could fall down. But I mean, as we've seen in Kenosha, with the young man who violently attacked and murdered protesters in Kenosha, as we've been seeing in cities throughout the country with right-wing counter-protesters being willing to use violence, vehicular violence and so forth, against those who they perceive as their political enemies. I think it's going to happen again, and I don't think that Pittsburgh is prepared for that. I think that we continue to think if we hold tight, the election goes our way, if things kind of settle down and we can have some slight reversion to normal, after November, after January, then some of this will dissipate. But I think that the underlying causes remain, and I don't think that as a city or a society we've done nearly enough to address what those underlying very dark currents in our society are.